You join the channel here, become a member, or over on Subscribestar. So he says, updated for a modern audience in reference to Rings of Power. Will fall into the same theme as I was just following orders. Pretty sure not only have these writers not read the books, they haven't even made it through all the Peter Jackson's movies. Yeah, that sums up Rings of Power pretty darn well. So Rings of Power explains why. I mean, it's like they tell you what they're doing right to your face. They do these interviews, and at no point in the interview does the interviewer have the F and stones to say anything real. To go, oh, I mean, this isn't really, I've read the books. I'm not an expert, but I've read them several times. It doesn't really seem to be in the theme of the feeling. It's like, because it's not, because what happens if the reporter actually says something real, if they actually have some balls? Well, they get just destroyed on Twitter, and then they get fired. So the reporter dares to imply that because it's a kind of a European folklore thing, and if they imply that these diversity is not quite working out so well because it's not in accord with the story, well, they just get fired from what? The thing. Oh, fuck. I'm writing for Variety magazine. It's like, okay, well, now you're fired. Oh, okay, so the only thing I can do is just give a puff piece interview and keep writing for the Hollywood Reporter. Yeah, those are the rules. So, like, we're not the media anymore. We're like just an advertising arm of Hollywood. And I say that, and that's exactly what all the media is right now. It's an advertising arm of basically whoever they're interviewing, whether it's pop culture or not. But always it's going to be worse in pop culture. Um, to say that sounds so obvious. Go, yeah, but the media wasn't always like that. They used to at least try to ask real questions back in the day. But it's not just it's the double threat of one. Well, the company wouldn't, if you're giving Disney a hard time if you're asking real questions, then they might not want to get you interviewed again. It's not even that so much because it makes Disney look kind of bad. It's that you would get destroyed on Twitter. You'd be called istophobic on Twitter if you dare to imply, if you weren't 100% on board with the globalism and the anti-whiteism and the misandry, you just get destroyed on Twitter, and then whoever you're writing for would just fire you. It's like, oh, so there really is no pushback to globalism at all. It's just a conclusion. It's like, yeah, it's a conclusion, but you can't put butts in seats. That you can't do. So there's this huge schism between what this mainstream narrative is and this left-wing Twitter social media narrative is. And then it's this big buildup about stuff like, oh, Charlie's Angels with Banks is going to be, some girl power thing. It's like, weren't the original Charlie's Angels girl powers? Yeah, but those were pretty girls who are having a fun time. This is going to be miserable girls who don't look like they're having a fun time. So there's this huge schism. It's like this buildup on social media. Yeah. This is going to be girl power. This is going to be what? And so what happens? Oh, nobody saw it. Why? Because nobody was allowed to criticize it on social media. Otherwise, they get dogpiled. They go, "Oh, just touch grass, my guy. Yikes, my guy. Have you ever put your finger on a woman? Like, what does it have to do with the movie being bad? It doesn't get people's touch grass, my guy." But you're not seeing it. Did you see the movie? Well, no. Just as it so happens, I was very busy that weekend and every weekend afterwards. I didn't actually quite go see the movie, but you should have seen it. That's really how they believe. Anyway, so no, there's not going to be any real interview in the mainstream media. What happens with Rings of Power is they're inserting a environmental message in there. So the Rings of Power writers admit that they changed the Mordor story, the origin story, and you can stop right there because you must ask, well, are you a master storyteller such that you think you can tell a better Lord of the Rings than the guy who wrote the stories? That is the only pertinent question. Are you better than the guy who wrote the origin story? And I can answer your question, no, almost certainly not. Well, because he's the guy who wrote the stories. And those aren't just like Philip K. Dick stories that have been rewritten a bunch of time. And a bunch of science fiction stories have been rewritten and reinterpreted. And, as much as you like Heinlein or Philip K. Dick, they're very good at what they're doing. Lord of the Rings was a cut above in fantasy adventure storytelling. It has stood the test of time better than anything else. So there are writers who could do variations on the theme if they kept the original spirit of Tolkien intact. But keep in mind, he was a Christian, and the spirit of Christianity and nationalism was in his books. And the thing is, once I didn't know, when I was reading the 4 books, I didn't really get that the Christianity stuff, like you saw with who's the guy who wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, those books. That was kind of obvious that the lion was, very shiny, the shiny light of the lion. It's like, yeah, okay, that was really that was more of a children's book on Christianity. It was very obvious. Lord of the Rings, I didn't get that as much. It just felt like a classic story of good and evil. But then when somebody points it out, the Lembas and stuff, yeah, and Mordor, you can kind of look through it, and it's like, oh, I kind of do see it now. So but for them, for like for the mainstream to take Christianity into its bosom, that's going to be a hard sell for them. He's a Christian. His spirit of Christianity and nationalism was in his books. Now that is a bridge too far for Amazon or Hollywood in general. I think there was a movie on Tolkien. I don't have to go back and watch that. And I think they ignore his Catholicism for the story because it's Hollywood telling the story. They're not going to touch Christianity. They recoil from Christianity like a vampire approaching a church. They just can't touch. They can't touch it without their hands, literally starting to smoke and catch fire. So Christianity and nationalism is a bridge too far for Amazon or for Hollywood in general. They're not Christians or nationalists. They're globalists and followers of the Antichrist. These people sacrifice souls, figuratively at least, to Moloch. Nationalism and Christianity is something Hollywood can't do. They can tell some dark, twisted mockery of Christianity and nationalism only for the preservation of non-European people. Nationalism for some, but not for you. Anyway, so nobody at Amazon is capable of retelling Tolkien. The insane hubris, just that sheer incandescent gall of thinking that plastic corporate horror Amazon could dare wash the feet of Lord of the Rings. It's really hard to comprehend ego that galactic in scale, but that is where we are now. But by now, you probably know that Hollywood's only goal is to further their globalist agenda. The story of Lord of the Rings actually gets in the way. They don't want the story of Lord of the Rings. They want the name recognition. That's it. It's just a vehicle to carry some Marxist lesson. In this case, the lesson is environmentalism, or the best you could hope to do, Tale of Krakatoa and what's that island that disappeared? Atlantis or something? I think there's some theory on that. So the best you could hope to do is stay as close to the artist's original vision as possible. That's it. Anything other than that, and you're going to screw it up. And in this case, there already is a story of Mordor. Apparently, it already means black land. So the story is already established by the time they Krakatoa the volcano. So they turned the black land into the black land. That doesn't make a whole bunch of sense. In The Peoples of Middle-earth, Christopher Tolkien writes in the notes section of the book, the name Mordor was maybe already an elvish name for the region because of its volcano and its eruptions, which were not made by Sauron, but were a relic of the devastating works of Melkor in the First Age. In the Silmarillion, Tolkien details that Sauron made Mordor his home because of the volcano. He wrote, there above the valley of Goroth, what sounds like the place of the skulls, was Belt's fortress, and that was probably intentional also. It was Belt's fortress vast, the Dark Tower, and there was a fiery mountain in the land the elves named Orud-rune. Indeed, for the reason Sauron had set there his dwelling long before, for he used the fire that dwelled there from the heart of the earth in his sorceries and in his forgeries, and in the midst of the land of Mordor he had fashioned the ruling ring. Tolkien wrote to Waldman, in the Silmarillion and Tales of the First Age, Sauron was a being of Valinor, perverted to the service of the enemy and becoming his chief captain and servant. He repents in fear when the first enemy is utterly defeated, but in the end does not do as he was commanded, return to the judgment of the gods. He lingers in Middle-earth, very slowly beginning with fair motives, the reorganizing and rehabilitation of the ruin of Middle-earth, neglected by the gods. He becomes a reincarnation of evil and thing lusting for complete power, and so consumed ever more fiercely with hate, especially of gods and elves. Stories are just vectors to them. It's a bait and switch. If they have a name recognition, like they're doing it with Velma, they're doing it with anything that you remember, and like you can go back to the '80s and all those '80s movies. I can promise you that they're going to retell all those stories, all the E.T., the Goonies, the Gremlins, whatever hit in the '80s. And if you're in your over a certain age, it's like they're hoping to hit to the kids now, to your kids when you're in the '80s watching like the Goonies and the Gremlins. they're going to retell it, and it's just going to be the abomination that it's going to be, because they're not interested in retelling the story. They just want the name recognition. Oh, the Goonies! I saw this as a kid in 1980, whatever. So my kids will enjoy it. And you show them this, it's like, ha 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 ha. They Disney Star Wars did. They Ghostbuster did it. They turned it into Charlie's Angels, or they Woman King did, or they what was the latest? The X-Men did. We should call it X-Woman. You get the idea. They're just gonna destroy everything you had any kind of memory of that was at least just decent popcorn, pop cultural entertainment. The Goonies is a perfect example of that. It's not some deeper meaning movie. It's just popcorn entertainment told very well. It's like, okay, what do we want to do? We want to tell a simple story very well. Okay. Once we master that we can do variations on a theme. But they don't even master the beginning, the simple core structure, before they start doing these variations on a theme that nobody buys. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. See you guys next episode.